Hi, everybody. It's Marlene with Eerie News, and today is June 15th, 2022. Today is June 15th, 2022. It's a Wednesday, and we are off to the races. And let's go back to one of those. I like these, what I consider historical mysteries kind of deal. All right. And this is out of the Medical Express, and it's titled Black Death Origin Mystery Solved 675 Years Later. The mystery of a deadly pandemic with mysterious origins. It might sound like a modern headline, but scientists have spent centuries debating the source of the Black Death that devastated the medieval world. Not anymore. According to researchers who say they have pinpointed the source of the plague to a region of Kyrgyzstan after analyzing DNA from remains at an ancient burial site, we managed to actually put to rest all those centuries-old controversies about the origins of the Black Death, said Philip Slavin, a historian and part of the team whose work was published in the journal Nature. The Black Death was the initial wave of a nearly 500-year pandemic. In just 8 years, from 1346 to 1353, it killed up to 60% of the population of Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, according to estimates. Slavin, an associate professor at the University of Stirling in Scotland who has always been fascinated with the Black Death, found an intriguing clue in an 1890 work describing an ancient burial site in what is now northern Kyrgyzstan. It reported a spike in burials in 1338 to 1339, and that several tombstones describe people having died of pestilence. When you have 1 or 2 years with excess mortality, it means that something funny was going on there, Slavin told reporters. But it wasn't just any year. 1338 and 1339 was just 7 or 8 years before the Black Death. It was a lead, but nothing more without determining what killed the people at the site. For that, Slavin teamed up with specialists to examine ancient DNA. They extracted DNA from the teeth of 7 people buried at the site, explained Maria Spraiu, a researcher at the University of Tübingen and author of the study. Because teeth contain many blood vessels, they give researchers high chances of detecting blood-borne pathogens that may have caused the deaths of the individual, Spirou said. Once extracted and sequenced, the DNA was compared against a database of thousands of microbial genomes. One of the hits that we were able to get was a hit for Yersinia pestis, more commonly known as plague, said Spirou. The DNA also displayed characteristic damage patterns, she added, showing that what we were dealing with was an infection that the ancient individual carried at the time of their death. The start of the Black Plague has been linked to a so-called Big Bang event, when existing strains of the plague, which is carried by fleas and rodents, suddenly diversified. Scientists thought it might have happened as early as the 10th century, but had not been able to pinpoint a date. The research team painstakingly reconstructed the Y. pestis genome from their samples and found the strain at the burial site predated the diversification, and rodents living in the region now were also found to be carrying the same ancient strain, helping the team conclude the Big Bang must have happened somewhere in the area in a short window before the Black Death. The research has some unavoidable limitations, including a small sample size, according to Michael Knapp, an associate professor at New Zealand's University of Otago, who was not involved in the study. Data from far more individuals, times, and regions would really help clarify what the data presented here really means, said Knapp. But he acknowledged it could be difficult to find additional samples and praised the research as nonetheless really valuable. Sally Wasef, a paleogeneticist at Queensland University of Technology, said the work offered hope for untangling other ancient scientific mysteries. The study has shown how robust microbial ancient DNA recovery could help reveal evidence to solve long-lasting debates. All right. And it's really interesting because obviously if they found this before the Black Plague went into Europe and decimated everything, but then you ask yourself, how did it get over there? I know that there was trade and et cetera, but I don't know what's but sometimes if you have an isolated group of people and they get sick and they're quarantined without being quarantined, in other words, they live in some remote place, and I'm looking at a picture here and This at the Cara Degage site, and this looks like in the middle of nowhere. How did it travel uh, and reach all the way? I mean, I know that there's theories about that it was carried with sailors and people traveling to for trade, but if this is one of the original ones, one of the original spots from where it came, I wonder how it made it to Europe. Okay, let's go on. And this story is really interesting. This is out of Bowl News. And it's really interesting because the last news that I did, there was a very similar case of a mystery plane being seen over the Carolinas. The local airports, and somebody even got a picture of it. Nobody can find out so far. I haven't followed or found out. Several people have seen the plane. It looks like a cargo plane, an older type cargo plane. The local airports say we don't have that, and what's very more interesting, there's no signage. There's nothing on the plane. And now this article, it's titled "Mystery Plane Puts East Europe Air Forces on Alert." A two-seater plane flew through half a dozen Eastern European countries without permission, alerting air forces before being abandoned in Bulgaria by an unknown crew, the Defense Ministry in Sofia said Thursday. The plane flew over Hungary before crossing into Serbia and then Romania before entering Bulgarian airspace at 7:09 p.m. on Wednesday. This would be this past Wednesday. Last Wednesday, I'm sorry. According to the Bulgarian Defense Ministry, the twin-engine Beechcraft with two people on board had no approved flight plans and its transponders were turned off. The pilot did not respond to radio requests and visual signals, the Romanian Defense Ministry said. Two Hungarian Gripen fighter jets, two U.S. F-16s, and two Romanian F-16s intercepted the intruder, one after the other, and escorted it until it entered Bulgarian airspace, Bucharest added. Bulgaria's Air Force did not immediately send up fighters as the plane was not considered a threat at any moment, Defense Minister Dragomir Zakov told journalists. His ministry said flying conditions had often been difficult amid a thunderstorm and heavy rain. The plane had stopped to refuel in the Danube town of Vidan in northwestern Bulgaria, and the Interior Ministry later found it abandoned in an old airfield near Targovishte in the nation's northeast. The engine was still warm, Interior Minister Boyko Rashkov told journalists. However, the crew had vanished and their whereabouts were unknown. Rashkov stated that the plane was 60 years old and had taken off from Lithuania for the first time. It also went through Poland and Slovakia. He said crossing 7 Eastern European countries without permission. I don't know. There's something wrong with that picture. I know that they're talking about a small non-military type plane or nothing that's armed. But normally you would think any type of plane that crosses into another country's airspace and doesn't stop or identify themselves, it's like either we're going to force you down or something. I don't know. Interesting. Nice little mystery as to who, what, where, why. Okay, let's move on to, this is out of The Guardian, and it's titled Mass Frog Burial Baffles Experts at Iron Age Site Near Cambridge. Archaeologists working near the site of an Iron Age home near Cambridge were perplexed when they uncovered a vast trove of frog skeletons. Quite more than 8,000 bones had been piled up and preserved is a prehistoric mystery. They were all recovered from a single 14-meter-long ditch right next to the site of an Iron Age roundhouse at Bar Hill, where there was a settlement during the Middle and Late Iron Age, which is 400 BC to 43 AD. The discovery was made by the Museum of London Archaeology Headland Infrastructure, conducting excavations as part of the National Highways. Apparently, they're doing some type of road improvement. Although it's not unusual to find frog bones at ancient sites, archaeologists are baffled by the sheer quantity of those unearthed at Bar Hill. Dr. Vicky Ewens, Mola's senior archaeozoologist, a specialist in ancient animal bone, told the newspaper, "In my experience, mainly working on sites from London, we don't get that many frogs. To have so many bones coming from one ditch is extraordinary." Noting that these bones belong primarily to the common frog and common toad, species found in garden ponds across the country, said we've also had possible evidence of pool frog, which is exciting. It's not something that we usually find archaeologically. In my research, I've found 2 Saxon sites with single bones on each. They're a frog that was only found in East Anglia that died out in the 1990s, possibly due to habitat loss, but has recently been reintroduced. As this is prehistory, finding an explanation is difficult. Although ancient civilizations, including the Egyptians, Mesopotamians, Greeks, and Romans, all saw the frog as a symbol of fertility, among other associations. It is unlikely that these amphibians had been eaten by the people living in the settlement. The archaeologists say that while there is evidence of amphibian consumption in Britain dating to the Stone Age, these bones have no cuts or burn marks. If the frogs had been boiled, however, this may not have left traces. Evidence of charred grain found near the site suggests that its inhabitants were processing crops that would attract pests such as beetles and aphids, which frogs are known to eat. So perhaps the frogs were drawn to the area by the promise of food, the archaeologists suggest. Other potential explanations include a prehistoric frog tragedy. The archaeologists say that frogs are known to move in large numbers in spring in search of breeding waters, and these could have fallen into the ditch and become trapped. According to one hypothesis, the unusual death toll might have also been caused by winter hardship. While hibernating frogs sometimes hide in the mud, extreme cold can kill them, and perhaps they fell victim to a particularly severe winter. Alternatively, they may have suffered disease, just as in the 1980s when UK frogs were devastated by a ranavirus. It is unclear how deep the ditch was. The field team dug through about a meter of topsoil and subsoil to reach it. Only small quantities of domestic waste were found at the site, which includes sherds of Iron Age pottery. The amphibians' bones were among a large number of finds, from artifacts to human remains, during around 40 excavations that took place between 2016 and 2018 across an area spanning 234 hectares. Analyses are still ongoing, even though excavations have now concluded. Ewens has spent the past 2 years studying the bones of animals, including cattle. Once all the studies come together, it is hoped that they will shed new light on lives led thousands of years ago and discover the reason behind the death of so many amphibians. Interesting, huh? What happened? They fell in the hole? They froze to death? Okay, this is out of a French newspaper called BFM Ile-de-France, and it's titled HAUTS-DE-SEINE. And pardon me, anybody, if I only got high school French lessons on my French pronunciations. The inhabitants of a haunted building request emergency rehousing. They wrote to the mayor of the commune on May 23rd to inform them of the supernatural phenomenon they claimed to witness. A ghost would be the source of strange noises, shadows, and lights, but also illnesses. On May 23rd, a missive landed in the mailbox of the housing department of the town hall of Fontenay-aux-Roses in the HAUTS-DE-SEINE. It reports a request for emergency relocation from 10 inhabitants of an HLM bar in the Blagies district. Nothing abnormal and even less paranormal for the moment, until the pattern is read. The signatories reveals that in the letter that their building is haunted from the first to the fifth floor of the same stairwell. They claim to feel a presence, to see shadows and lights, to hear strange noises. Quote, all the tenants concerned by this incident will be able to justify what they have seen, namely ghosts appearing in our apartments and in the building, pleads the author of the letter to the town hall. Following this, almost all the families are sick and affected with their children. We believe in witchcraft, they said. Before her move in 2013, Giselle did not believe in ghost stories. However, by dint of witnessing paranormal phenomenon in his apartment, concern has set in. Chairs, plates moving on their own, light bulbs turning off and on their own. These are scary things. Today my 14-year-old son is sleeping in my room because at night someone was tickling her feet. Giselle told BFM Paris Ile-de-France. Questioned by our colleague Suad, a resident whose son has been followed in psychiatry since a suicide attempt, defends this version. I can be crazy, you can be crazy, but the whole building cannot be crazy. Another resident fully agrees with the existence of what some describe as ghosts and others as jinns, the supernatural creatures from Islam. Compared to my belief, I know that things can happen. I'm a Muslim. We believe in witchcraft, he said, even to the point for some of talking about it with an imam. Suad confirms that in the latter advised him to pour salt on the threshold of his accommodation to ward off paranormal presence and to find comfort in the Quran. Various residents established a correlation between the supernatural elements they described in the death in April of 2019 of a 72-year-old tenant in his apartment, which is still unoccupied today. A man presented as a mystic by the residents who claimed to see ghosts himself. For its part, the town hall says it is surprised at the number of letter signatories, but doubts that supernatural causes can justify the emergency relocation that residents are calling for. The mayor nevertheless plans to receive the concerned inhabitants. We take things seriously because it is a suffering that is expressed. We will get in touch with a lessor so that he can inspect the building, explains the mayor. The building concerned was already considered to be dilapidated, in particular because of the presence of asbestos. In any case, it is planned as part of an urban renewal plan that all the 800 social housing units will be demolished and then rebuilt by 2030. Now, let me tell you something. This would be a good time to relocate those people. Now that's something to worry about, asbestos. Yeah, forget the ghost. Get out of there. All right, let's see. The next one is out of Ancient Origins and is titled The Demon Drummer of Tedworth, Exploring the Truth Behind the Story. As a species, mankind has always been obsessed with things that go bump in the night. Whether it be around a campfire written down in a book or shown on the big screen, we've been telling each other spooky tales for thousands of years. The 17th century case of the Demon Drummer of Tedworth may be Britain's earliest recorded ghost story, and many believe it is true. The Demon Drummer of Tedworth is often attributed as being the first recorded encounter with a poltergeist in England. A poltergeist, by definition, is a type of ghost responsible for physical disturbances. They tend to make loud noises, move objects, and generally make a huge nuisance of themselves. Most cultures seem to have some version of poltergeist folklore, and there are records of poltergeist activity dating back to the 1st century AD. However, stories of poltergeist activity became much more common during the 17th century. Why? The popularity of the Drummer of Tedworth probably has something to do with it. Details vary from account to account, and the tale has likely been sensationalized both at the time and since. The story goes something like this. In 1661, John Montpesson, who for ease's sake we'll refer to as a magistrate here, was visiting Luger's Hall in Wiltshire, England. While there, he ran across a local vagrant, a homeless man called William Drury. There had been many complaints in the area that Drury had been annoying the locals. Drury had been playing his drum non-stop and begging for money. Montpesson got himself involved, and upon confronting Drury, discovered that Drury's busking permit was fake. As a direct result of this, the local bailiff took away Drury's drum, but the whole case never went to court. After doing his good deed for the day and taking away a homeless man's livelihood, Montpesson went home to Tedworth. Unfortunately for him, when he got home, he found that the bailiff had, for some unknown reason, forwarded the drum to Montpesson's home. What follows is your classic spooky story. The haunting started with scary noises. The family was plagued by strange knocks and bangs and, of course, ghostly drumming. As time went on, the haunting appeared to intensify. After a month of near-constant haunting, the family was suitably terrified. Montpesson had tried to chase away the ghost with a pistol, but unsurprisingly, that hadn't worked. Things became more sinister, however, when the haunting began to focus on Montpesson's children's room. Loud screeching came from under their beds. The beds themselves would shake, and worst of all, the children would begin to levitate several feet above their beds. On one occasion, 6 men endeavored to hold the children down, but to no avail. This haunting went on for 2 years. The demon or poltergeist had in some ways a short attention span. While seemingly tied to the house, it soon moved on to Montpesson's staff. Objects would levitate around them, the children would be levitated from their beds or even pinned to their beds, unable to move. As time went on, the haunting appeared to become more mischievous. People's bedclothes would be pulled down while they slept, and objects would be moved around rooms. But the worst of the haunting seemed to have abated. Of course, this being the 17th century, Montpesson got a priest involved, backed up by some very sleep-deprived neighbors. The incessant drumming meant no one was getting any sleep. The priest supposedly found that when they all prayed, the sounds and drumming would stop, but as soon as the praying stopped, the noises would come back worse than ever. It would seem that the Demon Drummer of Tedworth wasn't a fan. Theory number 1. Drury the Wizard. At the time, Drury received the blame. He would eventually admit to having essentially cursed Montpesson. He claimed that the haunting was his revenge for Montpesson confiscating his drum and livelihood. If Montpesson would only return his drum, the haunting would stop. If we take this line of thinking, The demon drummer is no poltergeist but some kind of curse or demon. Its dislike for priests and habit of hiding Bibles would support this. Eventually, Drury was tried as a wizard and convicted. As was the English habit at the time, he was shipped off to one of the colonies, in this case Pennsylvania. It appears that around the same time the haunting finally came to a stop. Theory number 2. It was a hoax. The prevalent theory, however, is that demons don't exist and that the demon drummer of Tedworth was a hoax. Some experts at the time, such as Joseph Glanville, a clergyman and proto-demonologist, blamed the children. It's thought that since the majority of the hauntings happen in the children's room, and kids will be kids, they did it. The rest can be chalked up to good old-fashioned hysteria and religious fervor. Or it was Drury's pals helping get his revenge. It is thought that perhaps Drury got some old buddies in on the prank and they all made it their life's mission to ruin Montpesson's life for a couple of years. A final theory is that it was gypsies, either playing a prank or harnessing some of the terrifying gypsy magic. Around the same time as the haunting began, Montpesson had royally irritated a local group of gypsies after having one of their band arrested. Who or what was really responsible? As is so often the case with history, we're dealing with a whole lot of unreliable witnesses here. Many of them were scared out of their minds. Some of them were deeply religious and some of them were probably trying to make a quick buck. If you want to believe the story of the demon drummer of Tedworth, go ahead. For my money, it sounds very much like Montpesson had a habit of annoying those less fortunate than himself. I have a feeling that as the story spread, more and more people who had grievances against him decided to scare him and his family. Whether that be a poor old drummer boy, a band of gypsies, his long-suffering staff, or even his own daughters. Possibly. But you know what? For 2 years, that's a long time. People, when they want to screw with you, they do it for a little while, and then everybody's off to work or make money or go get drunk at the tavern, whatever. 2 years? That's a long time. Or maybe, maybe the drummer guy really was a wizard. And then he got shipped off to Pennsylvania. I wonder what happened to him. Okay, next one is out of the Smithsonian, and it's titled Blue Holes Show Hurricane Activity in the Bahamas is at a Centuries-Long Low. Oh, thank God. The 2021 Atlantic hurricane season was the third most active in 171 years of record keeping. The 2020 season was even worse. There were so many tropical cyclones that meteorologists tore through the list of possible storm names and needed the Greek alphabet to keep track of the overflow. But a new study shows that even this flurry of activity may be something of a lull in the centuries-long record of Atlantic hurricanes. The evidence that hurricane activity is at a historical low is hiding on the Caribbean seafloor, tucked away in an odd geological feature called blue holes. These open pits form in limestone, often above collapsed caverns. Prolonged erosion weathers the edges into an eerily circular shape. Blue holes are similar to sinkholes, but on a much grander scale. They can be 300 meters deep, like the Dragon Hole in the South China Sea, or 300 meters wide, like the aptly named Great Blue Hole in Belize. The Bahamas is home to the world's greatest concentration of blue holes, making it an appealing destination for paleotempestologists, scientists who study historical tropical cyclone activity. The seafloor at the base of a blue hole acts like a calendar of past storms. Much like an ice core or tree ring grows season after season, the sediment at the bottom of a blue hole builds up over time. Natural currents coax a sugary sprinkle of small sand grains into the hole, while violent hurricanes pitch larger grains into the pit. By comparing layers of coarse and fine grains in the sedimentary lasagna, researchers can count how many hurricanes passed nearby. What makes a blue hole a valuable long-term record is that once the sediment settles, there's very little activity in the pit to disturb it. Hines Hole, a 340-meter wide hole that penetrates the seafloor in the western Bahamas, offers a prime example of a blue hole hurricane record. It sits halfway between Cuba and the Florida Keys and is far from any landform, so it can chronicle weaker storms that blow in from any direction. The base of the hole is also low in oxygen, so no animals live there to disrupt up the delicate sediment. A steady surface current shooting over the hole sends 2 to 3 centimeters of sand tumbling into Hines Hole each year. Hines Hole, says Tyler Winkler, a geologist at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts, who led the study, has the highest sedimentation rate of any blue hole he and his colleagues have seen. For the new study, Winkler and his team drilled 18 meters into the sediment at the bottom of Hines Hole, recovering cores representing the past 540 years of deposition. After comparing the top layers to the modern hurricane record, the researchers have high confidence that Hines Hole recorded every Category 2 or higher hurricane within 75 kilometers. Analyzing the cores even further shows that the number of tropical cyclones roiling this corner of the Bahamas is in a historical lull. Over the last 170 years, we've had about 5 hurricanes per century on average, Winkler says of the local record from Hines Hole, but the rate has been almost 8 times that in the past. According to the research, the area around Hines Hole has experienced major swings in storm frequency since 1480. The team cross-checked their findings with other Bahamian blue holes as well as with tree rings and even ship's captain logs. The study shows that hurricane activity has dipped since the 1860s, shortly after modern record-keeping began. That means every hurricane since Alfred Nobel invented dynamite has occurred during a historically quiet period in the area. Sediment cores extracted from blue holes are important, says Holly Kilborn, a climate researcher at the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, who was not involved in the study because they can provide a glimpse of the pre-industrial era. That's something the instrumental records can't do, she says. As a bonus, the limestone shelf of the Bahamas is rich with blue holes. They're in the perfect spot, she says. Winkler and his team plan to return to Hines Hole to dig even deeper to gain more context for the current lull. There's at least 60 meters of accumulation at the bottom of Hines Hole, which could illuminate more than 2,000 years of hurricane history. That's why this particular site is so important, Winkler notes. There's nowhere else we've encountered yet that has the potential longevity and resolution for storm activity. Hines Hole shows that in the pre-industrial era before record-keeping began, the Bahamas experienced far more annual hurricanes than it does now. If that heightened activity returns, even the Greek alphabet may not be enough to keep them track of them all. But hopefully it's going to stay in a lull. Okay, I thought this was a cute story. I had to include it. It's out of UPI and it's titled Authorities Seek Owner of a 300-Pound Mystery Pig Wandering in Tennessee. The Carter County Sheriff's Office said in a Facebook post that the sow has been wandering for days in the Judge Ben Allen Road area and no owners have yet come forward to claim the 300-pound animal. Authorities are trying to find the owner who's damaging property. The sheriff's office said the pig had been helping itself to plants on neighbors' properties. Shannon Posada, director of the Elizabethton Carter County Animal Shelter, said officials are hoping an owner comes forward soon because the county does not have the proper equipment to capture or house the pig. We have no way to transport a 300-pound pig. We have nowhere to put a 300-pound pig safely. Unless we ask for a foster, and we're happy to ask for a foster, but still we have no way of transportation for that large of an animal. Posada said officials might ask for help from local farmers if no owner is found. I understand they can do a lot of damage in a short period of time, Posada said. We would think that someone would be looking for this pig and notice that it's on the run. Of course! How do you miss my 300-pound pig? Where did it go? This thing's huge. I feel bad. That tells me this animal's not wanted. This animal's not wanted. I don't know if it's maybe whoever kept it, maybe it ate too much. Maybe they're moving and, where they're going, you can't take a 300-pound pig. But, yeah, you just don't. My 300-pound pig, I haven't seen it for a while. Yeah, that's on purpose. That's on purpose. Hope somebody adopts the pig. And this other one is out of Smithsonian. It's titled Rarely Seen Paintings by J.R.R. Tolkien Portray a Lush Lord of the Rings Landscape. By the way, I wasn't aware that Tolkien also did art. That's interesting. In his high fantasy novels, British author J.R.R. Tolkien combined his academic training in languages and his love of storytelling to create Middle-earth, a fictional continent populated by wizards, elves, orcs, dragons, hobbits, talking trees, and other mythical creatures. But Middle-earth didn't just live in Tolkien's head. The Lord of the Rings author was also a skilled artist who sketched, painted, and mapped the worlds that he was imagining as he wrote about them. Many of the original illustrations in The Hobbit were created by Tolkien himself. Audiences can now view a selection of Tolkien's rarely seen Lord of the Rings artworks for free via the Tolkien's Estate newly updated website. The portal, which debuted last month, also allows viewers to explore documents, images, and audio clips related to Tolkien's personal life and his lesser-known pursuits as a map maker, calligrapher, and artist. According to an emailed statement, the site features 12 previously unpublished items, including Tolkien's paintings of flowers and exotic birds, a draft manuscript of the homecoming of Birnoth, Borthelm's son, and photographs of the author and his family. This website debuted on February 26, a date that might ring a bell with die-hard Lord of the Rings fans. February 26, 3019 was the date in the Third Age when the Fellowship of the Ring was broken at Amon Hen and Frodo and Sam set out on their lonely and terrifying journey to Mordor, per the statement. Born John Ronald Reuel Tolkien in 1892, the writer was orphaned at a young age. He fought in the trenches during World War I after graduating from the University of Oxford. He later returned to Oxford as a professor, earning fame as a linguist and publishing a translation of the Old English epic poem Beowulf. Elements of Beowulf, Tolkien's closely held Roman Catholic faith, and his friendship with other British writers such as C.S. Lewis have all been cited as major influences on The Lord of the Rings. Many of Tolkien's books started as bedtime stories for his 4 children, John, Michael, Christopher, and Priscilla. A devoted father, Tolkien drew elegant pictures for his children when they were young and wrote frequent letters to them as adults. These letters and drawings can be viewed on the new website. Christopher created many of the maps for The Lord of the Rings. Based on his father's detailed plans, notes Harriet Sherwood. He served as Tolkien's literary executor until his death in 2020. Tolkien, for his part, died in 1973 at age 81. The author's youngest child and only daughter, Priscilla, died just last month. Well, this is a little bit dated. Died on February 28th of 2022 at the age of 92, according to a statement from the Tolkien Society, a charity and literary society that operates independently of the Tolkien estate. Tolkien began working on the manuscript that became The Hobbit in the early 1930s. The book was so successful upon its completion in 1937 publication that Tolkien's publishers encouraged him to write more stories about hobbits, whom he described as short, gentle people who live in holes underground. The subsequent tales became The Lord of the Rings, which was published in 3 volumes between July 1954 and October 1955, and quickly became one of the most famous English-language fantasy series in modern history. More than 150 million copies of the trilogy, which has been translated into dozens of languages, have been sold to date. Those interested in exploring more of Tolkien's art can visit Tolkien, Maker of Middle-earth, an online version of the 2018 exhibition on the author's art and life at Oxford's Bodleian Libraries. More than 100 paintings and illustrations by Tolkien are also available to peruse. A 1990 compiled by Tolkien researcher. So in other words, this website you can view a lot of other things. I wasn't aware that he was a cartographer and an artist. Very interesting. Well, that's it for today. I hope you really enjoyed this batch of unusual stories, and I will be back with you soon for some other weird and, let's face it, sometimes cute stories like that. The 300 lost pig, abandoned pig, whatever, in the streets of Tennessee. Till then, take care.